the Masonic Path to Light. Welcome to this presentation on the Masonic Path from Darkness to Light. I have tried to make it informative and interesting enough to keep you awake for the next 45 minutes. I hope that you will consider your time well spent. Next, I would like to explain the idea behind this lecture. All too often, we hear Masons complaining that Freemasonry is monotonous, that we keep on repeating the same set of rituals, meeting after meeting, month after month, that there is no intellectual stimulus. There is some merit in this. It is like going to the beach. For a while, it is interesting to watch the waves crashing on the shore and receding only to come back again. But after some time, it begins to pall. We are bored watching the same waves time and again. But if only we take the trouble to venture below the surface, to explore the depths of the sea, then we will be able to see a veritable kaleidoscope of enchanting sights. We will never tire of those. So it is with Masonic ritual. Most of us stay on the surface and do not venture into its depths. We are all so focused on memorizing the ritual to word perfection and delivering it effectively that we do not take the time to reflect on its hidden meaning. Reflection is important because Freemasonry conducts us through life only by reflection. We must also remember that Freemasonry teaches through allegories and symbols. Therefore, the words of the ritual obviously mean much more than they say. If we make an effort to understand what those words are really saying, we shall then find that Freemasonry is full of meaning, that it hides deep spiritual concepts within its allegories. Therefore, the purpose of this lecture is to promote understanding of the ritual. It attempts to decode the ritual by relating its important words and actions with corresponding words and concepts in the scriptures. These scriptural quotations have been deliberately, and you might perhaps say rather too liberally, chosen from the sacred volumes of various religions like the Upanishads, the Holy Bible, the Guru Granth Sahib, to show that the truths taught by Freemasonry belong to all religions. Masonry. Next, I would like to give you an overview of this lecture. We shall first have a brief introduction which will lay the foundation for the ensuing discussions. We shall next define what we mean by light and darkness and understand the relationships between the two. After that, we shall take up the main topic of this presentation, which is the Masonic path from darkness to light. This is divided into 6 subsections, namely awareness of darkness, the way to light, knowledge of light, darkness visible, seeing the light, and finally, merging with the light. We shall then sum up in a brief conclusion. In keeping with Masonic tradition, I would like to start my labor this evening with a passage from the scriptures. You are all children of light and children of the day. We don't belong to the night nor to darkness. True, isn't it? We are all creatures of light. We draw our sustenance from light. We revel in light and we adore light. We abhor darkness. We are afraid of darkness and therefore we avoid darkness. But then, who is this we that we are talking about? It is not merely the physical you, he and I. There is someone else. There is a duality, a dichotomy in all of us. In a profound sense, man is not a single entity, but two entities acting as one. The Upanishad tells us, deep within every being is hidden a self who is not illumined. And while the external man revels in light, this self languishes in spiritual darkness. It is very seldom allowed to come out into the light. It is this self that prays, from darkness, lead me to light. Tamasor mam jyotir gamaya. What happens when the self wants to come out into the light? We feel some vague disquiet, some strange uneasiness. We try to overcome this by taking up some religious activity, like maybe going to the temple, or maybe praying, or maybe listening to the scriptures, or whatever. Why do we do that? That is because we know intuitively that the summum bonum of every religion is to draw the inner man from darkness to spiritual light. All religions teach us that the purpose of life is to discover that light and guide us towards that goal. Freemasonry acknowledges that the sacred scriptures of every religion contain precepts that can help us see the divine light innate in all of us. That is why it is not sectarian and reveres all scriptures as great light. The next question is, what does all this have to do with Freemasonry? Well, Freemasonry also has the same purpose as religion. It also tells us that there is an inner self, which it calls that vital and immortal principle that resides in this perishable frame. That the real purpose of life is realization of this self. It says that this is the genuine secret. Material considerations like rank and fortune, power, fame, or sensual pleasures that drive our lives are called substituted secrets. Freemasonry points out that in our mindless pursuit of these substituted secrets, we have lost the genuine secret and directs us to search for it and restore it to its proper place. Just think about this for a minute. The genuine secrets, whatever they were so important that the three ruffians stooped to murder to acquire them. Yet, Solomon, that wisest of men, substituted them with some casual gestures and meaningless words. The compilers of Masonic Ritual have subtly highlighted the striking contrast between the value of spiritual enlightenment, which we call genuine secrets, and the worthlessness of our material pursuits, which are termed the substituted secrets. Then there are the mystics. They are not content with mere realization of the self. They desire something more, to contact God, to see the divine, and to experience truth. Being a mere part is insufficient. They long to annihilate themselves in the whole, the eternal. We find them in every religion, like the great Sufi saints, Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti and Nizamuddin Auliya. And we have all heard of Meera, Arnav, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and most recently, Ramalinga Valladar. They are said to have sublimated the corporeal bodies to unite with God. Masonic ritual also culminates in this mystical union. Thus, the underlying purpose of Freemasonry is no different from that of religion. In fact, it has distilled the essence of all religions and teaches it through its unique system of allegories and symbols. We shall now trace the Masonic path from darkness to spiritual light and compare it with that of religion. Before proceeding on a discussion about the path from darkness to light, we must first define what we mean by light and darkness and understand the relationship between the two. Light illuminates. It enables us to see. It is therefore accepted as a universal symbol of truth, of the real, knowledge, and of the good. We shall use the word light to mean what is called the spirit, the soul, the Atman, or the self. As the Upanishad says, the self is our light. Atmaiva Jyotir Bhavati. Darkness, on the other hand, obscures and conceals. It prevents us from seeing the light. Therefore, we tend to think of darkness as the opposite of light, as representing falsehood or the unreal or ignorance or evil. Darkness here shall mean spiritual darkness and not physical darkness. Light and darkness are one of the many pairs of opposites that influence our lives. We need to understand the interrelation between light and darkness before we proceed further. For instance, the night is dark, but as the day breaks, darkness diminishes and completely disappears at noon, only to return at dusk and to envelop the world again at night. Thus, physical light and darkness, like weakness and strength, ignorance and knowledge, are located at the ends of a continuum, and progress from one end to the other is gradual. But some pairs of opposites, like life and death, are mutually exclusive. The transition from one to the other is not gradual, but instantaneous and absolute. Death is the absence of life. So long as there is a merest vestige of life in a body, it is not dead. It is a person. And at the instant life leaves a body, it is no longer a person. It is dead. It is a corpse. It is the same with spiritual enlightenment. One is enlightened or one isn't. There is no partial enlightenment. Until there is light, there is yet another type of darkness which exists even in light. This is due to the non-perception of light. The Bible says, "The light shineth in the darkness, but the darkness comprehendeth it not." When we fail to perceive the light, we see only darkness. This lack of perception is due to our inability or unwillingness to see the light. The Mahabharata illustrates this with the examples of Dhritarashtra, who was blind and could not see, and Gandhari, who blindfolded herself and would not see. Freemasonry and the path to light. We now come to the topic of this lecture. How does Freemasonry lead us from darkness to light? What is the Masonic path to light? We are born in the East, the source of light, the source of divinity. And as long as we retain the innocence of childhood, this light shines bright in us. But as we go through life, we get corrupted and move away from light to darkness, from the east to the west. The light becomes progressively dimmer, and somewhere along the way, we manage to bury it completely. Then, at some point in our lives, we are forced to admit that we have lost the light and all we have left are the worthless substituted secrets. It is this loss of divinity that Ghalib mourns when he says, "Na tha kuch to khuda tha, na hota to khuda hota. Dubo diya mujhe hone ne, na hota to main kya hota." Before I was born, I was God. And had I not been born, I would have been divine. Being born has ruined me. Oh, what would I have been but for this birth of mine? The great 13th century Sufi teacher Nazmuddin Razi describes this as the path of God's bondsman from origin to return in his book Mirsad al-Ibadat. The 14th century English mystic Walter Hilton describes this path in his SCALA Perfectionis, that is, the steps to perfection. Freemasonry has adopted the three-stage path prescribed in the SCALA Perfectionis. They are the purgative or purification stage, the illuminative or the enlightenment stage, and the unitive stage, in which union with God is achieved. The three craft degrees correspond to these stages. Within the framework of these three degrees, there are 6 distinct milestones in the Masonic path to light. I would like to call them awareness of light, the way to light, knowledge of light, darkness visible, seeing the light, and finally merging with the light. We shall discuss these milestones. Let us start with awareness of darkness. When we joined this fraternity, we were no different from most men. Our lives were driven by material considerations, and we had given little time or thought to our spiritual development. We were in a state of spiritual darkness, and this darkness was due to our lack of perception. As Swami Vivekananda pointed out, who makes us ignorant? We ourselves. We put our hands over our eyes and weep that it is dark. Like Gandhari, we had tied a blindfold on our eyes and refused to see. Let us now go back to our initiation. We were brought into the lodge in a state of darkness with a blindfold on to symbolize our non-perception of light. Then, an allegory from the Chandogya Upanishad was enacted, with we, the candidate, as the protagonist. I quote, "If a man is blindfolded, led away, and left in a strange place, he will turn in every direction and cry out for someone to remove his blindfold and show him the way home. And if a passerby, hearing his cries, remove his blindfold and points out the way, the man can reach home, asking his way at every village. So does a man who meets with an illumined teacher obtain true knowledge." Unquote. We, like the man described in the passage, were groping in the dark because the blindfold of ignorance did not allow us to see the real light. We had to suffer many trials and tribulations because of this. And because the darkness was merely due to non-perception, it was easily dispelled by removing the blindfold and restoring light. Only then did we figuratively realize that we were in darkness till then. And after removing the hoodwink, the first things that were pointed out were the three great lights to guide us on the way to achieve enlightenment. This passage stresses the need for an enlightened master to remove the blindfold and to show us the way. The Guru Granth Sahib says, like a lamp lit in the darkness, the spiritual wisdom of the Guru dispels ignorance. Interestingly, Freemasonry also acknowledges this need for a Guru. In fact, this was one of the first things impressed on the apprentice. I would like to quote the following catechism that occurs in the beginning of section 1 of the first lecture. As a Mason, whence come you? The West. Whither directing your course? The East. What inducement have you to leave the West and go to the East? To seek a master and from him gain instruction. After making us realize that we were in a state of darkness, Freemasonry goes on to teach us what we should do to see the light. It shows us the way to light. As we saw earlier, the first step in the path to enlightenment is the purgative or purification stage. Because the first requisite for anyone hoping for spiritual enlightenment is purity of life and actions. Every man that hath his hope in him purifieth himself, says the Bible. Likewise, Freemasonry insists that the heart should be purified from every baneful and malignant passion for it to be fitted for the reception of truth. Therefore, Freemasonry recommends the practice of every moral virtue. It uses simple stonemason's tools to instruct us in the moral and ethical values that we should adopt to improve ourselves. It has given us the Jacob's ladder, comprising of every virtue, as a means to ascend to that light. Of these, charity is the most important, because it helps us to give up what we really do not need, and thus develops detachment, which is an essential requisite for spiritual. But virtue alone is not enough. It has to be supplemented by knowledge. Freemasonry also tells us that the next requisite for self-realization is knowledge, which is symbolically represented by the 7 liberal arts and sciences. Knowledge brings about discrimination, the ability to distinguish between right and wrong, good and evil, prayers and prayers. Sri Adi Shankara, in his Viveka Chudamani, says, I quote, just as a bird needs 2 wings to fly, one needs the 2 indispensable wings of detachment and discrimination to rise to the top of the house of liberation. Unquote. Detachment and discrimination enable us to be stable between the numerous pairs of opposites like joy and sorrow, victory and defeat, pleasure and pain that we encounter in life. This stability is so vitally important that the Bhagavad Gita mentions stability or samatva no less than 24 times. I quote one such passage. He who regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal towards the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, he who treats alike both friend and enemy, and has renounced all material values. The 2 great pillars symbolize these pairs of opposites. We have to begin our spiritual journey only by passing between the 2 pillars and learn to be balanced and stable between them. Freemasonry also stresses this stability in a curious manner. We are told that the 2 pillars, when conjoined, denote stability. For God said, in strength I shall establish this mine house to stand firm forever. Interestingly, nowhere in the Bible do we find God saying this. The nearest to it is God's promise to David. He shall build me a house, and I will establish his throne forever. Therefore, the whole thing is an elaborate ploy by the compilers of our ritual to introduce the word stability in conjunction with the 2 pillars. We now come to the next stage, which is the knowledge of light. Having passed the 2 pillars, we climb to the summit of the winding staircase to enter the middle chamber. Now let us discuss what it really means, or how we obtain knowledge of light. In the 2nd degree, we are permitted to extend our researches to the hidden mysteries of nature and science. What are these mysteries of nature and science? It is the science of metaphysics. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that studies fundamental questions such as the nature of reality, man's relationship with God and the external world. Let me give you an example. The Annapurna Upanishad tells us of a king who asked a great sage to instruct him on the path to self-realization. The sage advised him, inquire in your own mind, who am I? How is all this brought about? How do death and birth happen? Thus will you earn great benefit. This is precisely what Freemasonry also tells us. It invites us to reflect on the awful subject of death and guides our reflections to that most interesting of all human studies, the knowledge of ourselves. It asks us whence we came and whither we are directing our course. It's worth noting that neither the sage nor Freemasonry give any answers. They just suggest a line of inquiry to guide us. It is for us to find the answers. By pursuing this line of inquiry, our intellectual faculty is developed to such an extent that it can reach the throne of God Himself through the path of heavenly science. Sri Aurobindo describes this path as climbing beyond the earth of body and heaven of mind by the ascending path of the truth to find this Godhead waiting for us. This ascending path of the truth is symbolized by the winding staircase. As we gain the summit of the winding staircase, we find the Godhead symbolized by the letter G, the sacred symbol, waiting for us in the center of the building or the middle chamber. This tells us that the light we have been searching for has always been within us. It has to be found in our heart, the very center of our being. As Jalaluddin Rumi says, why do you knock on all doors? Knock on your own heart. The Upanishad also says, this self, the Purusha, the size of a thumb, resides in the center of the being. Angushta matra Purusha, Madhya Atmani Tishtati. If and when we have gained this knowledge, and only then can we genuinely claim to have become paragraph Freemasons, prepared fully by Freemasonry for the revelation of the light within. But we need to be cautious. We will be tempted to abandon this arduous quest and revert back to our old ways. Freemasonry advises us to be on guard against the attacks of insidious temptations and shield this sacred symbol with the sign of fidelity. We now come to the most intriguing phrase in the entire craft ritual: darkness visible. The darkness of the apprentice was due to his lack of perception and was easily dispelled by removing the hood. But the case of our Master Mason now is different. He has been fully prepared by Freemasonry to see the light. He is willing to see the light, wanting to see the light, and waiting to see the light within. In spite of this, when he searches deep within himself, he does not see light. All he sees is darkness, impenetrable darkness. Why is it so? It is because logical reasoning, conditioned by experience and knowledge, is limited and finite. But the self that is within us is unlimited and infinite. It is beyond experience, knowledge, or even imagination. Let me give you an example. Supposing you were to ask me what I will do if I had 5 crores. It is easy. It is within the scope of my experience, I can tell you. Supposing you were to ask me what I will do with 500 crores. Well, it is not within the scope of my experience, but it is certainly within the scope of my imagination. I can still answer you. But supposing you were to ask me what I will do with 5 lakh crores of rupees. Well, it is beyond my experience and way beyond my imagination also. I can't answer you. It is the same here. Human intellect can only conceptualize the divinity in native man. It cannot comprehend it. That is why Dryden asks, how can the less, the greater comprehend, or finite reason reach infinity? It cannot. Infinity or divinity can only be experienced and not understood. And this experience can only be attained by divine providence. But divine providence is not given to all. The Bible says that many are called, but a few are chosen. The Upanishad also states more categorically, the self can only be attained by one whom it chooses. To such a one, it reveals its own nature. So, anyone who wants to become a true Master Mason must, with humility and resignation, bend to the will of the Most High and accept that this darkness is all that he can hope to see unless he has divine assistance. He should understand that the light of a Master Mason is but darkness visible, which the eye of his human reason cannot penetrate unless assisted by that light which is from above. To quote Dryden again, reason saw not till faith sprung the light. Masonic ritual reiterates this need for divine grace twice. First, when we say that we hope to find the genuine secret, not at the center or in the center, but with the center. This implies that we can find the divinity that dwells in the center of our being only with its own assistance. Again, during the raising, when we say that the entered apprentice grip proves a slip, what we mean is that the virtuousness of the entered apprentice is not enough for enlightenment. Neither is the intellectual capability of the fellow craft. We can hope for enlightenment or spiritual union only when the Master, symbolizing the Most High, deigns to raise us with the strong grip of spiritual faith. Brethren, this is the farthest point to which Freemasonry, or any other human agency for that matter, can guide the seeker. From here, the chosen few travel into the realms of epiphany and mysticism. The rest can only hope that they may also be chosen someday. Freemasonry can only speculate on what could lie ahead. What could lie ahead is enlightenment or seeing the light. Enlightenment is described by every religion as seeing a brilliant light. It happened to St. Paul, or Saul of Tarsus as he was then, on the road to Damascus. The light was so brilliant that he was blinded for 3 days. Sri Guru Granth Sahib says, the divine light shines in their hearts, and like the sun which removes the darkness of night, it dispels the darkness of ignorance. The Upanishads too describe this light in many different ways. Let us go back to the time we were raised and we stepped into the temple. Our eyes had yet to adjust and everything was dark. All we could see was the figure of the Master at the far end, beyond the intervening darkness, and lit by the light of the pedestal. This image is beautifully captured by the following description in the Upanishads. Vedehamekam purusham mahantam aditya varnam tamasas purastat. I know that sunlight Purusha shining beyond the darkness. This enlightenment is the purpose of life for most, but not for all. There are still those who want nothing less than union with God. The raising ceremony of the third degree is a symbolic enactment of this union. The second or final stage of mystical union is being attained. The second or final stage of mystical union is attained by being absorbed in the Supreme or merging with the light. We had earlier mentioned people like Meera, Nandana, Chaitanya, and Ramalinga Adigarar giving up their bodies and merging with the Lord. That is what we are talking about here. I am sure that there will be a few skeptics who do not agree that the third degree is about this mystical union. So, I would like to offer some validation of this hypothesis. I would therefore like to ask you a question. Why is the third degree called the sublime degree? What is sublimation? Normally, if you heat a solid, it melts into a liquid. If you heat a liquid, it becomes vapor. But some solids straightaway become vapor without leaving any residue or going through the liquid stage. For example, the naphthalene balls that we use to keep off insects just disappear into vapor. Similarly, iodine, if heated slightly, becomes vapor. This process is called sublimation, and we call this degree sublime because we are talking about the body becomes spirit. As the 17th century alchemist Sir George Ripley said, I quote, and sublimations we make for three causes. The first cause is to make the body spiritual, unquote. Some who have experienced inner divinity can no longer wait for the ultimate union with God. As Swami Vivekananda puts it, the more you think of yourself as shining immortal spirit, the more eager you will be to be absolutely free of matter, body, and senses. This is the intense desire to be free. With this intense desire driving him, death ceases to be the king of terror to the enlightened Mason. He actually welcomes it as a release from his body. Therefore, he steps without fear or diffidence over the grave and surrenders his corporeal body to the will of the Master. The raising that follows is the sublimation of the self. This is when the Master, representing the Most High, comes down to lift the Mason and holds him with the 5 points of fellowship. This is beautifully described in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. I quote, he lifts some out and unites them with himself. Unquote. This is the unitive or the ultimate stage of mysticism, and with that, the Mason merges with the divine light. His spiritual journey is ended. We shall now sum up. We have established that the primary purpose of Freemasonry is the pursuit of light. Light here means realization of the self, the absolute, that which alone is real, the Supreme Being. Hence, the end is to lead us to the Supreme Being and bring us out of ourselves into harmony with it. This Supreme Being may be interpreted by each of us according to our individual faith, but it is recognized by all religions and creeds as the ultimate unity into which all things merge. Freemasonry helps us to attain this end by giving us a system of allegories and symbols inherited from the ancients. Freemasonry has preserved these symbols for us, and it acts out these allegories for us. But it places the responsibility of reaching the real through them squarely upon each of us. It is for us to study these symbols and allegories and reflect upon them until they reveal the light to each of us individually. Freemasonry has marked out a path for us, and it is for us to travel on that path. Freemasonry can only show us the way. The Buddha's last words to his disciples were, Appo Deepo Bhava. Be ye lamps unto yourselves. That, brethren, in essence, is Freemasonry's message to the seeker of spiritual light. Thank you.